Washington reeled in another commitment on Tuesday. Tight end Charlie Crowell announced he'll be coming to Washington.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So Lars, big news on Tuesday afternoon. Charlie Crowell announced that he will be committing to Washington. He was another member of Arizona's class of 2024. He's a 3-star tight end from Summit High School down in Oregon. And this is a really good depth take for Jedd Fisch and the Huskies, where we talked about a little bit about him on Monday's show, and now we get a chance to expand a little bit more about him and just, go a little bit in depth about a guy who looks like he's got some nice upside here.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the crucial thing. And, as we were getting ready to record, I was thinking, okay, we kind of alluded to it yesterday pretty much that, and most guys that if you signed with Arizona and you asked for your release from your NIL, you've come to Washington. I don't believe there's been anybody else that went from Arizona that went elsewhere. But there's kind of two parts to that. One, it also shows that the staff, that most of the guys they took, they're like, hey, like we actually evaluated these guys. We do like them. Like it's not like we just took them because we're at Arizona and we can kind of take some lower rated guys and just see what happens. It's like, no, we actually want them at Washington because we believe in their talent. And then two, to your point, when you look at the tight end room, you're like, yeah, you can play tight end. Yeah, come. Yes, please. We need bodies here.
Yeah.
It's and the thing about this is think of it like Drew Sample back when he committed to Washington, when originally they had Chase Blakely committed and they flipped and they ended up going to Washington, Boise State, respectively, when Peterson and Sark had their coaching transition. This is a similar like Drew Sample take where it's a solid, it's not going to wow you, but it's not going to be underwhelming. And it's a guy who could probably play as a freshman and certainly play a significant role as a sophomore and a junior. And then whether he sticks around for a senior year, so yeah, but he's going to be one of those blocking, kind of hard nosed, but still able to catch and be a reliable body in that sense. Because he's not just a blocking tight end. When you look at 6'5", 235, 240, 230, he plays more at 240, so I would expect that to be his more come-in way when he plays that. But when you look at his frame, it's a perfect, you're not too concerned with him maybe adding on a little bit of weight, maybe a little bit of muscle, that sort of thing, or going down just a little bit, because he's able to handle that point of attack. He's able to handle coaching. We mentioned off air he plays basketball as well, so he's a tough kid. He's not afraid to kind of go in there and mix it up a little bit. And so when you look at the depth that Washington has and probably needing to play at least one, if not both freshmen, there's a safe bet here that he's going to be able to find some playing time right away.
Absolutely. And it's something where you still aren't, with a take like this, you're not concerned to go out and maybe add one more in the spring transfer portal period, where it's somebody who maybe is going to be a little bit more of a pass catcher type where, we'll see what happens with Ryan Otton, where obviously he struggled with injuries and other things over the course of his Husky career. But that's somebody who, you can't, and this is not a knock on him, but you can't necessarily say you can rely on him at this point just because you don't know what it is that he brings to the table. So you want to make sure you have extra insurance there. Where right now behind Quentin Moore, who can be penciled in as the starter, both Crowell and Decker DeGraaf are true freshmen. So, you were really expecting Josh Cuevas to be somebody who could step into a Tanner McLaughlin role like we saw him play down at Arizona last season. And now you look at what Charlie Crowell can provide, where he's not going to do that either right off the bat, where you think that maybe with a couple of years he can develop into a nice safety valve and somebody who can do a bunch of different things for you maybe after the catch. But right now he's not there just yet. He has solid speed on film, but there's not one thing outside. His main thing is a blocker, where there's not one thing as a receiver you can point to just say, this is going to translate really well to the college game right away. Whereas, like we said yesterday, Decker DeGraaf is kind of the opposite of that, where you expect him to be somebody where you can maybe split him out and have him run some routes in that McLaughlin role right now. And where you kind of look around and just say, all right, well, let's see who puts their name into the transfer portal period this spring. And we can still rely on Crowell as a blocker, maybe not burn his red shirt right away, depending on what route they decide to go. But that's somebody you can put him out there as a blocker. You can rely on him as that second or third tight end, depending on the personnel, depending on what you decide to do, and just say, yeah, we're comfortable with having his development start here. and see where you can build on from there.
And you would like to think probably he'll find his way on special teams as well, just in the blocking sense to just kind of get used to that in a sense. And with Power being the special teams coordinator as well, that's just a perfect fit. But it's also kind of good that you mentioned Decker DeGraaf, because almost in a way, as you're saying that, it's like, okay, we're going to start you off with some receiving packages. Maybe we'll get you there as a blocker, but we know you can for sure be a pass catcher and a route runner in certain specific areas, probably not going to play every single game, right? But just, when you're calling upon Decker DeGraaf, you're thinking of him more as a receiver, and you're kind of going to eventually, those two paths are going to cross where Decker is going to become, maybe as a redshirt freshman, more of a blocking tight end, and you work at Crowell, kind of trying to get him out on some routes, trying to almost reverse so that by the time they get to their third year, they're both kind of in that same mold. Like, hey, now whichever one of you wants to start is going to be whoever is able to pick it up the most and kind of use their opportunities the most. But the point is having a balance of both, because you don't want two blocking tight ends where it's like, okay, great, we could use you guys. Well, you'll block, but now we're basically running on every one of those plays when you're bringing in 2 and 3 tight ends versus, okay, now there's actually a threat where 2 of our 3 tight ends could be pass catchers, or they all 3 could block, or they all 3 could catch. Right. And so I think that when you get into, okay, it's not just about playing freshmen, right? It's like, okay, you also have to be able to execute the offense in order for it to make it work, right? Because otherwise you're playing freshmen, but you're winning 4 and 5 games, which is not what Jedd Fisch wants to do. So in order to do that, you have to maximize how they can impact the team as a freshman and then benefit them long-term.
Exactly. And that's something where when you look at him right now, he's really raw in terms of development. And like I said, where you can't rely on him. He's not going to be somebody who's going to come in and catch 30, 40, 50 passes. I don't know if he's somebody you want catching 10 in his true freshman season, where if that's something you have to rely on, something else has gone extremely wrong. But you really like the potential and the upside. And it's something that, from familiarity with Jordan Paopao during his first stint at Washington, that this is the kind of player that he really likes in a particular role, where we saw Will Dissly kind of have that same career trajectory where, he's not catching a whole lot of passes over his first 2, even 3 seasons. But then once a couple of things fall in a certain way, you can rely on a little more, and you can just say, this is somebody who we can utilize over the course of the offense. But I'm really curious to see how this is going to mesh with Decker DeGraaf, because again, it's not something where, you're going to rely on them to do similar things, but I'm really, really high on what DeGraaf brings to the table as a true freshman and what he might be able to do with not only just the state of the tight end room as a whole, but with what Jedd Fisch's just plan is for some of these true freshmen, where he said, we're not afraid to play them. We're not afraid to have them go out and, make some mistakes early on, because we know that 2-3 years down the line, these are players that we're going to rely on to be a big part of this offense. And he's somebody who, if I had to pick one true freshman right now on the offense, where you just say there's only one player who's going to burn their red shirt on the offensive side, I would probably go with Decker DeGraaf. And a lot of that comes from the state of the tight end room, but a lot of that is also just where he is right now as a pass catcher.
Yeah, that's a fair bet, because especially once you start thinking down that list. But also to your point earlier about it doesn't limit who you can get in the spring portal. I think I almost wonder, do they get 2 still, knowing now you're bringing in true freshmen? I think you only get 1, and then that kind of, do you go for a mid-year, like a sophomore, junior, or do you just try and get a one-off senior and let Ryan Otton kind of prove what he can do throughout spring and fall camp, and then maybe reassess after the season? But because I think that's kind of the ultimate goal, right? If you're Washington, right, that Ryan Otton is able to emerge, right, becomes the 4-star recruit that he was in high school, and then you just need a compliment to him. Now again, the problem is we can't go into the season saying that, or even into the spring saying that, because there's no film or anything to indicate that's the case. But you still, because he's on the roster, because there hasn't been any clear indicator otherwise, right, that he's certainly not going to play in the spring. Now, if that comes out, then you start to wonder, okay, now maybe you get a second tight end and work through that. But until then, you're kind of hoping that Ryan Otton can still come along. So that's why taking true freshmen and 1 transfer is kind of a more positive sign in that regard.
Absolutely. So, Lars, with that being said, let's talk about some of the evaluators that Jedd Fisch has brought onto his staff, because there's some good ones. right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Some of the coolest things about Game Time are the last-minute tickets, the flash deals, the zone deals. There are all kinds of deals on the Game Time app, and it's so easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, because Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute seats, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of that difference. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $20 off with code LOCKEDON on your first purchase. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. And when we talk about recruiting, we got to talk about our friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, just like some of the evaluators that Jedd Fisch has brought onto his staff, like we're going to talk about after this break, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, make the process even easier and quicker. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So Lars, as we talked a lot about visitors on yesterday's show, and there were a couple of visitors that we didn't really get a chance to talk to or talk about, where, we focused on some of the big names, the Anquan Fagans, the Dijon Lees, and the Matai Tagoas of the world, where one guy that I'm really curious about that was prioritized really early on in the process is Will Rogers High School. Shout out to quarterback Will Rogers, from Tulsa, Oklahoma, defensive lineman Josiah Hammond. We talked about defensive tackle being a position on the West Coast that isn't necessarily, super stacked this season. So Josiah Hammond is somebody who's an unranked 3-star right now, and he just played his first season of high school football down there, and his tape is really impressive, and he's already racked up 8 D1 scholarship offers, including Iowa State. Kansas is in there, and Washington is a team that he seemed to have prioritized early on, where we'll see kind of what weight he decides to play at and as he learns the game. But he's somebody where you turn on his film and, I don't want to say that it's like watching Ratumana Bulavu for the first time last summer. You say, oh, this isn't, a lower to unranked 3-star, and wow, this guy really jumps off the page in that way. But you watch his film and you say, oh, wow, this is a really, really good player. There's a lot of real tools here and traits to work with, but he's definitely very raw, and you can see just kind of why the coaching staff likes this guy and kind of what they may see in him, and scheduling an official visit with him this early in the process is very intriguing to me.
Exactly. And I think because that's the thing that is promising, especially when when Jedd Fisch and their whole staff talk about, hey, we're going to be relentless recruiters and things like that. Well, there's 2 ways to go about recruiting, where you're still offering the 4 stars, the 5 stars, and the high 3 stars and things like that. But then you're one of the first a couple of schools to offer kids that are not ranked or that don't have those offers. And you become almost like what Chris Peterson was like under his tenure at Washington, where, hey, we're going to be the first school to offer Daniel Hamili, and Bob Gregory tells Hamili as he's offering him, by the way, I'm your first call. There's going to be about 15 more coaches calling you in the next 36 hours. And literally Hamili called him back, I think like 3 days later. It was like, yeah, you weren't kidding. Literally all these schools just trickled in with offers just over the next period. And so it's like, it's being that first call. Now, again, when you get them all in kind of a lump, it's like, hey, but it really comes down to, because that's one thing that, I've talked to a number of these kids, and I'm sure you have as well, that are coming in from Arizona, where we were one of their first offers. This school was one of my first couple of offers, and not that means everything to a kid, but especially when kids start to blow up, and like you mentioned, the defensive lineman, he'll probably be a 4-star, right? It's almost kind of reminds me of Hiro Kanu, right? When he came out of
Santa Margarita,
Santa Margarita, right? Where Maurice Himes was the one that I, kind of like was looking for. And then you just watch Hiro Kanu, and dude just blowing up left and right. And, again, he was an international kid that came over and things like that. But there's always ways to find kids that are under the radar. And I think that's one thing that Jedd Fisch is clearly, and his, Armand Hawkins, you talk about the recruiting staff that he's brought with him, that these guys know how to find the obvious talent and recruit the obvious talent, but then also find the under radar guys where, hey, this is a 4-star guy, but he was kind of a late emerger or whatever you want to call it. But we saw him, we were on him for, months before other schools started offering. And so, those don't truly factor in when a kid's coming down to, do I want to go to this school or that school? It's like, well, hey, like I have a relationship with these guys. Like these guys were like the ones, like I really like Alabama. No, I'm just using that as an example, but Jedd Fisch was like the first coach to call me and notice me. So it's like, there's those little things that end up mattering. And that's one thing that I think Jedd knows well in recruiting.
Absolutely. And that's something where it's cool to kind of see that tradition continue at Washington, where for a while now, this is a team and just a program that has developed these 3-stars for a long time, where you look at what Chris Peterson did for a while. You look at what Kalen DeBoer's staff was able to do with some of these guys. And now it looks like it's going to try to continue under Jedd Fisch, where, they're wanting to, take these big time 4 and 5-star kids. Like, look at the show we put out yesterday. 3 top 100 visitors coming in. That's something that we didn't see under Kalen DeBoer. So it's cool to take that step, but still say, all right, we're going to try to develop these under the radar guys. And, as much as recruiting rankings really shouldn't play a factor into some parts of the process, they definitely do. And then 2 guys that we can talk about that kind of buck that trend. One of them is current commit Jake Flores, who you look at him and you say, oh, wow, look at this offer list. This is somebody who's rated as a 3-star, but you look at his offer list and you just say, okay, this is somebody who a lot of teams have made a priority. And the same can be said for John Mills, another 3-star offensive lineman from California, who scheduled an official visit for that same weekend with Dijon Lee and Tagoai and Raiden Vinesbright. And he's another guy where you watch his film and you say, okay, this guy should probably be a 4-star, rated as, one of the higher 3-stars in the country right now. But you look at his offer list, Florida, Michigan, Texas, USC, and you say, okay, I understand why this is somebody who not only is Washington's coaching staff is prioritizing, but there are a lot of coaching staffs around the country that are doing so. And you don't necessarily want to call that guy a hidden gem because he rated in, the low 3, high 400s in the country, which is still a very hard thing to do. But you look at that and the optics of it are, oh, it's a 3-star offensive lineman. Oh, what's this going to look like? You turn on the film and no, this guy's really good. You really like his tape. You like the way he moves. He's really physical. And it's really cool to see that trend continuing. And it's something where, getting a whole bunch of 4 and 5 stars in a class is really important, but having these 3-star guys that you can take and develop and maybe even play early on, like for example, look at Nick Harris during his time at Washington. And you just say, this is somebody who we think we might be able to rely on as a redshirt freshman. That's still what makes a great program what it can be, where look at how many 3-stars there were when you look at the 2023 starting group for the Huskies.
Right, exactly. And I think that's kind of the misnomer when you say 3-star, right? It's like, okay, basically the 3-star is the one where it's like, hey, high upside, but not going to play a factor for 3 years, right? It's like, hey, he projects well, but he's not right there where the 4 and 5 stars are immediate impact guys. But that's kind of the thing with evaluators, right? Where, just like you look at recruiting services and things like that, okay, you have your opinion, we have ours. And that's why, like, you can't say stars don't matter, right? Because again, no Power 5 school is going to take a bunch of unranked kids and say, you know what, we can try this. We'll figure this out. It's like, no, at some level, you do have to have a baseline of talent. But a lot of times 3-star guys are either ones where they're at a smaller school. I mean, I remember Taylor Rapp for a while was a 3-star out of Seaholm. It's like, and obviously, even Nick Harris was even a 2-star, whatever you want to call it, and so Parker Brailsford was a 3. So it's like, there's the misnomer of 3-stars, like, oh, great, we're 3-star you. It's like, well, if you have 2-star coaching with 3-star talent, you're going to be 3-star you. But if you have 4 and 5-star coaching with 3, 4, and 5-star talent, you can be a 4 and 5-star program. And I think that's what Jedd Fisch is building at Washington.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, because you look up and down this coaching staff and it's, when Armand Hawkins is talking about what John Richardson has done over the course of his career, developing some of these guys, and quoting him where he said, wait till he gets his hands on a big fish. And look at Anquan Fagans, look at Dijon Lee, where it's really cool to just kind of see that coming to fruition. And you could say the same, look at what Kevin Cummings did with Jacob Cowings and Dorian Singer. And then he gets his hands on Tyrone McMillan, and he does what he's expected to do, turns him into a first-round pick. Where you can say that for so many guys along this coaching staff, that now just trying to get that to continue at Washington, where, it's still a bummer to not see guys like Scott Huff and Jamarcus Shepard retained. But sometimes that continuity is what a head coach looks for. And looking at all the guys that Jedd Fisch brought with him from Arizona, just a little over a month into the process, you can understand why that happened and why some of these guys were retained, why they were brought over. But, talking about the retentions, there were some new coaches that came in. And one of those guys was defensive coordinator Steve Belichick, who went on Chris Long's Greenlight podcast last week. And he had some really interesting things to say. And we're going to get into that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So, Lars, listening to Steve Belichick talk to Chris Long, who he did coach for a year, was really, really fun, because he dove into a lot of, I also really enjoyed listening to him talk about his time with the Patriots and Gerard Mayo and everything he learned. But he talked a lot about coming to the college level, and he identified a lot of the things that he's going to do, where I enjoyed him saying, all right, well, I'm not going to, rubber stamp the New England defense and bring it over here, because I have to build it to fit the kids. But something we talked about a couple of weeks ago was him saying, or just looking at the corners, like taking Afici and Sprysock and looking at how he's going to fit into the system, and just some of the other guys that this coaching staff has brought in already. And I really liked listening to the scheme aspect of it. I really enjoyed listening to him, show a little bit of personality, talk about his dad as a house guest and how Bill Belichick will be around the program at least a little bit in some capacity. And then also talking about recruiting and just saying, yeah, this is a really big adjustment, where he's very transparent and saying, yeah, FaceTiming, a 16, 17-year-old is not something I ever thought I'd have to do in my life. But, it was really cool to see him kind of be very open and transparent about the process, saying, yeah, I'm still learning the difference between NIL and NLI, where, some fans might say, oh, that's a problem. But for somebody who spent his entire life in the NFL, you understand why that might be a little bit of just some growing pains there.
Yeah, I honestly, I was laughing so hard, but not in a bad way, not like,
oh, because great, yeah,
because it's like, and I think that's what, if I'm Jedd Fisch and I'm like, something like, wow, you're hiring a character like a Belichick, it's like, but he's not a character. He just can kind of, give off the persona. But he really is like, if I'm a recruit, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, this guy's like not boring, but he's, he's almost like a younger Pete Kwiatkowski, right? Where it's like, hey, yeah, I can talk to you. I love talking to him. Like, once you get to know him, but if you like look at him and the outside perception does not actually meet the reality, like, oh, wow, he's kind of a dull guy. He might need some help on the recruiting show. Yeah, he's certainly going to need some help with some calls every now and then. But I could easily see, I think after a few months of, getting it under his belt, I could easily see Steve kind of getting a natural, just developing his natural recruiting ability. And that, I think, is kind of just almost kind of the Belichick way, right? Where you can't force Steve Belichick to recruit. It's like, look, I will do this FaceTime call, but I'm going to be like quirky, and I'm going to be like, almost like a Kalen DeBoer dad, where it's like, I don't know how the screening works. I don't know how to figure this out.
So there were a couple of things that I took from that particular part where he's talking about recruiting, where a couple of things where my bet is the very first call he made was to Matai Tagovailoa, where the two positions that he talked about extensively were safety and linebacker, the two positions that Tagovailoa happens to play. And he said, yeah, one of the weird questions that I feel really dumb having to ask was, why do you play linebacker, or why do you play safety? And I get different answers like, oh, my coach told me to do it, or this is what I want to do, where for a couple of different reasons, those mainly being those are the two positions that he plays, where it feels like that was the first call. But it was really cool seeing him just kind of talk about the process in that way. And, you can kind of put two and two together and just say, oh, be interesting if that was one of the first people that he called, because one thing that I took from that as a Patriots fan was looking at New England's defense over the last couple of years. And one guy that they deployed in a really unique way was that same type of player in Jabril Peppers, where Jabril Peppers probably had one of the best years of his career in New England a couple of years ago. And it was really cool to kind of see that resurgence. And it's something where if you can pull in a guy like that, because we got a couple of questions where, oh, how likely is it that all three of those top 100 recruits are going to sign with UW from our show yesterday? It was, oh, probably not all three, but Tagoe seems to be they seem to be in a really good spot with him. Dijon Lee is another person where they're definitely still very high on his list, but being able to just say, all right, we can utilize you in a very unique aspect. Like here, look at what we did with Jabril Peppers and turned him into a really productive player at the NFL level after he struggled to find a home at a position for so long. We just kind of let him do what he did best in college. So it's kind of cool to kind of see him get back to those roots. And at the same time, just show some vulnerability to just say, yeah, this is going to be a huge adjustment was really fun for me.
Right, because I mean, there's always the negative recruiter like, oh, why are you going to go play for that guy? It's like, well, again, just because you can't figure out a camera doesn't mean you can't coach football. Like, I could care less if he struggles on FaceTime or, does whatever. Sure. It's like, if he can coach me up well and he's a good dude and he relates well to me and actually cares, which clearly, I think that's the thing. It's like, you can see how genuine Steve Belichick is. I think you can genuinely tell that he actually wants to be in Washington. He's not like, well, I guess I got to go do this because I didn't have any other option and my dad wouldn't put any calls in for me. It's like he doesn't sound bitter at all. He sounds like, hey, you know what? If I'm going to break out on my own, I can easily go back to the NFL at any point. Why not at least try college so I can understand these younger, newer guys that are coming into the league so that when I go be a head coach or a defensive coordinator, I either have coached some of these guys, recruited some of these guys, or, in some way had a relationship with some of these guys. So it's actually a great long-term play for him too. Because, I mean, the easiest one was just, I'll say as like a, special teams coach or DC and, I don't know.
And he kind of said he could have stayed around the NFL if he wanted to. Yeah. And he cited his relationship with Jedd Fisch as one of the reasons he decided to make the move, which was interesting to see. And he sounds like such a football guy because he sounds exactly like his dad, which I know he made a comment about too. But he was just like, yeah, the only thing I'm doing is going from the hotel to the stadium, every single day. That's it, which is fun. I enjoy that aspect of it's like, yeah, I'm just doing this full bore every single day, which is cool. And then on top of that, he just seems to be very bought into the whole Washington side of things where, for better or for worse, some fans seem to be tired of the way the whole greatest setting thing has been played out. But Steve Belichick was like, hey, look at the view of my office. I was enthralled by the view when I was here for an interview, and everything about this is so cool. And having Chris and Kyle Long to be like, oh yeah, no, I want to come play for that. That's awesome. I love that. Where just that whole aspect of it is something that all that publicity is really cool. Where you think about 5-10 years ago when Chris Peterson was still trying to build up this program, that's not something that you're seeing. You're not seeing him go out on a lot of national shows and do that kind of thing. And Kalen DeBoer did a really good job of that, going on Pat McAfee, doing all those different things where I highly doubt this is going to become a regular occasion for Steve Belichick. But even doing that as a one-off is really fun publicity for the university. And as the school makes their way into the Big Ten is something that can only help long-term.
Man, could you imagine Steve Belichick on the Pat McAfee show? Just hold that image there for about 10 seconds. Because here's the thing, like for all the people will say about Pat and that whole show and everything, the one thing it does get attention for is 18 to 22, even high school age recruits. So because like Pat's a guy that can relate to the high school guys watch him. He's a funny guy, does whatever, and you see your head coach or you see your coach that you can play for in college on that show, and it's not Nick Saban. It's like, okay, hey, you know what? Why not? Like, let me learn about this guy a little bit because like Pat's not going to have a nobody on his show, so it's like there's opportunities like that. And I think that's also an astute point, the fact that, Steve Belichick went on Chris Long's podcast. Granted, it's a player-friendly podcast and all that. But again, he could have just called
and somebody who he has a relationship with at the same time.
Exactly. But he could have easily been like, yeah, like I'm not really a big, media guy. I'm not a this and that. Like, I'll call you, Chris. Or maybe I'll come on in a couple of months after I get there. But I think coming on this early when he's like, hey, look, I'm literally just doing this. Like you mentioned, football hotel. Like that's it. Like I'm not out, hiking, fishing, doing whatever. It's like I'm here to coach football, and so I think there's nothing better and a more promising sign. We talked about a couple weeks ago on the show where we got to see how these guys are as recruiters. I think naturally a recruiter just knows how to turn the phone, has the phone sideways, isn't looking weird, has a basic office. I mean, yeah, good for me.
That's no, and that's a thing where you got to see a little bit of everything. Where it's, oh, is he going to be a robot like his dad? And I, being a Patriots fan, I'm a huge fan of everything his dad did for so long, but he just made a point to be like, no, that's not something I want to do. I don't want to be in that same mold where I get pigeonholed into being, all right, I'm a Belichick. This is what I have to be. I want to be a different person. And there are certain things I can't control about that, but there are other things that I can. And it feels like going to college, taking that route is one of those things. But at the same time, he just seems to have a very, very nice attitude about it, because it could be, all right, I'm just here biding my time, waiting to get back to the NFL, but it's no, I'm here, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this full bore.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the other promising thing, because it's not a Mike McDonald situation where, I mean, yeah, maybe he does go to the NFL next year and Washington kills it this year, goes, 11-1, Belichick sets up a perfect defense, and then Vinny takes it over next year. But he doesn't sound like at least he's thinking that way right now. And again, nobody's ever going to say that, right? But you can kind of glean some things like, well, I still got to get used to, trying to recruit. He's like, no, I made my first FaceTime call. I'm pitching this place. I'm not just like, yeah, Washington's interesting. It's kind of rainy. It's kind of, it's like, no, he literally went, he's as much as a Belichick is going to express emotion. I think that's what he did.
Absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We've got so much more fun stuff coming for you over the next couple of weeks. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you subscribe, like the video, leave us a comment down below. If you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Thursday.